fast we stand. We look to a brand new horizon. The future now firmly in our hands. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong. Feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. Hele, hele, bravo. Opa, you sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Naki, you drum Caracom. Tabu, ya tabu, awo. Opa, you sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong. Feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. Hele, hele, bravo. Opa, you sing Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. Hele, hele. Tabu, ya tabu, awo. Naki, you drum Caracom. Leve, leve, wow. From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high and sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong. Feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for Caracom. The great distant lands our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for CARAF. Though great and diverse be
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Please take your seats as we await the arrival of the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor-Motley.
I didn't even recognize that was you there. Are you? She's masked.
Ladies and gentlemen, please stand. Please remain upstanding while we listen to the national anthem of Barbados. Kindly sit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Weeks, and I am the Finance Advisor to the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean. I will be your master of ceremonies for this morning's event. At the outset, I wish to acknowledge the presence of the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, Queen's Counsel, Prime Minister of Barbados, and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, the Honorable Kerry Simmons, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship in Barbados. I also acknowledge the Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund, Mr. Ronald Sumer, the Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, Dr. Gary Jackson, and Mr. Simon Zellner, Program Manager for the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, as well as Dr. Devon Gardiner, Program Manager of the CARICOM Energy Unit. These are the persons who are here physically with us, but I also wish to acknowledge those who are joining us virtually because of the pandemic, and specifically I refer to Mr. Joseph Cox, the Assistant Secretary General of the CARICOM, who is also Director of the CARICOM Development Fund, and the directors of both institutions who are being highlighted this morning, the CARICOM Development Fund and the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. Special invited guests in our virtual community, I thank you for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us in the official launch of two very important flagship facilities within the sustainable energy sector, the Project Preparation Facility and the Credit Risk Abatement Facility. These are commonly referred to by the acronyms PPF and CRAF. Today is a watershed moment in the regional sustainable energy sector within CARICOM member states, and this will also be underpinned not only by the launch, but the signing of a cooperation agreement between these two forward-looking regional institutions, the CARICOM Development Fund, CDF, and CRAF, both of which are domiciled in Barbados. As we seek to be as efficient as possible in the dispatch of this morning's agenda before us, I now hand over to Minister, the Honorable Kerry Simmons, to welcome you to the event. Minister Simmons.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Mr. Master of Ceremonies, the Honorable Mayor Amor Motley, QC MP, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados, Mr. Ronald Sumer, Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund, Dr. Gary Jackson, Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, Mr. Simon Zellner, Program Manager, Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, and Mr. Devon Gardiner, the Head of the CARICOM Energy Unit of the CARICOM Secretariat. Other specially invited guests, ladies and gentlemen of the media, ladies and gentlemen all. Good morning to you again. It is my pleasure this morning to present these brief opening remarks at the launch of the Project Preparation Facility and the Credit Risk Abatement Facility held jointly between the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency and the Caribbean Development Fund. Both of these facilities aim to address the long-standing challenges faced by many CARICOM member states, which are striving to achieve both regional and national targets in the area of energy transformation. While it cannot be denied that many sources of international funding are available to finance the transition to more sustainable energy sources, the Caribbean region remains hindered and restricted in its ability to adequately assess and access such financing. Across this region, the myriad challenges which we are facing include project preparation, technical assistance deficits, project execution, the ability to properly monitor and evaluate the success of projects, the access to the right types of financing in order to suit our specific and unique needs, and of course, the access to financing that is sufficiently flexible in order to take into consideration the potentially devastating burden of natural disasters such as hurricanes, which, as you are well aware, especially at this time of the year, can wreak havoc on our economies and greatly retard our pace of development. In Barbados specifically, we are aiming to move from being fossil fuel dependent to becoming powered by 100% renewable sources by the year 2030. And this ambitious target, with its 11-year planning horizon, has been described by many as being heroic. And while that may be the case, in practical reality, its consequences have been that it has triggered a restructuring of the ministry responsible for energy, so that projects, quote unquote, both in terms of their execution and in the context of their monitoring and their coordination, have now been prioritized alongside standard policy-based sectoral responsibilities. And what began as a simple project execution unit in the Division of Energy, staffed with only a handful of technical project staff, is now therefore a much more adequately staffed project monitoring and coordination unit, headed by a permanent secretary with specific responsibility for project management, monitoring and evaluation, the matters of procurement, administrative support, technical support, and financial management, as well as public education and communication. Having this strategic unit has made the management of renewable energy projects far more practicable, and it has also allowed for a deeper focus on the implementation activities which are tied to the 2030 target. But beyond this, I am certain that all member states will recognize that this necessary process of transformation is one which must, by its very nature, transcend merely cosmetic adjustments. It will require fundamentally reconstructive approaches in terms of organizational structures and in the modernizing of the way we conduct business generally. An entire restructuring of this sector is therefore inevitable and unavoidable as we forge into the new and uncharted realm of energy generation. The creation today of the CRAF project preparation facility, as well as the credit risk abatement facility at the regional level, will now allow us as regional project developers to have a safe space where the necessary assistance can be provided to ensure that no one is left behind in our quest for energy self-sufficiency and independence in the supply and generation of energy. In the current difficult global economic environment, it is also critical that there be more borrowing and financial flexibility opportunities available to assist small and medium enterprises in particular in their quest to fund renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. In this regard, I am pleased that CRAF will now be available to provide much needed credit risk guarantees to financiers and also targeted technical assistance to build capacity among small, medium enterprises. As also it is necessary for them to be able to lend assistance to other stakeholders within CARICOM member states and to financiers as well. To my colleagues at CRAF and at the CDF, your commitment to advancing this vision is commendable and is much appreciated. I thank you as I look forward to the presentations today and to listening to your ideas about the tremendous potential of these two facilities and about how they will work, and perhaps most importantly, how soon they will be able to be of benefit to us all. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Simmons. The next item on our agenda will be opening remarks from the Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund. I do not want to steal his thunder, but just to give you a synopsis of the CARICOM Development Fund. It is an institution of the CARICOM community and has the mandate to provide financial and technical assistance to disadvantaged countries, regions, and sectors within the community. It was established in 2008, and the current Chief Executive Officer is the second Chief Executive Officer. Without further ado, Mr. Sumer, your opening remarks.
Thank you, Robert. Honorable Mayor Amor Motley, Prime Minister and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment of Barbados, the Honorable Kerry Simmons, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Senator Rawdon Adams, Director for More Developed Countries on the Board of Directors. I think he's joining us remotely today, as well as other CDF board members joining us remotely. Importantly, Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM, responsible for trade and economic integration. Ministers and permanent secretaries of ministries of energy across the region, representatives of financial institutions, energy service companies, other service providers, and small and medium-sized enterprises, representatives of regional agencies, development partner institutions, and diplomatic missions based in Barbados, the wider region, and further afield, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, members of the press, all of you joining us here in person and online via meeting and social media platforms, good morning. On behalf of the CARICOM Development Fund, the CDF, I extend heartfelt appreciation to all of you for being here with us today to launch the CDF's Credit Risk Abatement Facility, which we call CRAF for short, which is being done jointly with the launch of the Project Preparation Facility, or the PPF, of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And of course, let me also recognize the members of the head table, including Gary Jackson, the Executive Director of CRAF. Permit me to briefly place the Credit Risk Abatement Facility initiative in the context of the rationale for and the purpose of the CDF, notwithstanding the Master of Ceremonies' brief reference to the CDF. The CDF was established pursuant to Article 158 of the Revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to provide technical and financial assistance to countries, regions, and sectors that are determined to be disadvantaged, among other reasons, by the implementation of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, the CSME. By addressing or preempting those situations of disadvantage, the CDF, through its program activities and product offerings, promotes greater economic and social cohesion within the community, and thereby strengthens the platform for deeper and more beneficial regional integration. The 2008 agreement establishing the CDF provides us with our own separate and distinct legal personality. Among other capacities, our unique mandate and identity orients and empowers the CDF to treat with the developmental needs of both the public and private sectors in the pursuit of our core objective of attenuating economic and social dislocation. Consistent with that objective, since the inception of our country programs in 2010, the CDF's interventions have been geared towards three broad areas. Firstly, addressing structural diversification and infrastructure development. Secondly, facilitating regional investment promotion and mobilization. And thirdly, facilitating business development and enterprise competitiveness. These two latter thematic thrusts, facilitating and mobilizing investment at the regional level and enabling enterprise development and competitiveness, will be significantly advanced once the CRAF that we are launching today becomes operational. Today, therefore, marks a significant milestone in the accomplishment of our mission. This journey began 3 years ago when the CDF, as part of the Finance Working Group for the Caribbean Sustainable Energy Roadmap and Strategy Platform, recognized the need to address funding gaps and to craft financing solutions to support investments in the sustainable energy space. So how did we seek to respond to that need? We started from the premise that CARICOM member states, in delivering on their climate change response priorities, understand and accept that they must engage the private sector, particularly small and medium-sized enterprises. Domestic investment in sustainable energy technologies and practices represents a close positive nexus between the environmental objective of reducing energy emissions and therefore mitigating the adverse impact on climate change, and the economic pursuit of enhancing business competitiveness by reducing operating costs. SMEs, however, as Minister Simmons pointed out, are typically at a disadvantage and challenged in their bid to invest in renewable energy and energy efficiency technologies and measures. One such perennial challenge, which we all know, is a lack of access to financing. And an underexploited avenue for increasing ease of access to finance for SMEs is the active encouragement and facilitation of the local financial sector to become a significant player in providing innovative financing options. So one of the key drivers in the design of CRAF was the need to establish a catalyst for expanded lending by empowering local market players to exploit untapped opportunities. We all recognize the typical hesitation of the financial sector to participate in this vital area of sustainable energy financing. Critical impediments that they point out are the high risks, whether these are real or perceived, associated with SMEs, compounded by the lack of knowledge and experience in underwriting loans for projects related to renewable energy technologies and energy efficiency. To address this gap, which the CDF identified through various consultations with stakeholders, we developed the CRAF as an all-encompassing mechanism designed to help build the market for energy investment financing on both the supply and demand sides. So in that regard, the CRAF represents a creative solution to the related problems of energy sector knowledge deficit and information asymmetry, and it is geared at incentivizing financial institutions to provide incremental lending to SMEs for these projects in CARICOM. As we commence operations, the first phase will constitute a pilot rollout focusing on 5 target countries: Barbados, Belize, Guyana, St. Lucia, and Suriname. And that pilot will run for 1 year from January to December 2021. Some of the projects in these pilot countries have already been identified and earmarked for CRAF support. During that 1 year period, we will also be establishing a modern IT platform that will automate several processes, including applications for credit support that fall within certain limits. We will also be actively seeking to build out the pipeline for the non-pilot countries in preparation for rollout across the region. Now, we're all aware that we're living in difficult times. Launching a new product, particularly of this nature in such uncertain times, means that we will have to exercise creativity and flexibility and remain resolute in our efforts to achieve success during this initial phase. Doing this while primary stakeholders and targeted beneficiaries in the private sector persist with their own efforts to adapt and innovate to survive in this challenging environment. We at the CDF have every expectation that the SME sector in particular will embrace CRAF as part of a systemic response to the adjustment necessary to survive and continue operating through this phase of transition to economic recovery in the short to medium term. I am delighted to be able to officially announce today that this new credit risk abatement facility is being launched with an initial capital base of US $10 million, which is available to underwrite guarantees that will unlock in excess of an estimated 100 new loans totaling approximately $26 million to SMEs for renewable energy and energy efficiency technology investments just in the pilot year. Another US $3 million is available for technical assistance to build the capacity of financiers to appraise and manage sustainable energy projects, to provide services to SMEs to improve the technical quality and bankability of their projects, and to build the capacity of energy service providers, in particular energy service companies. We are extremely excited about this pilot phase of CRAF and want to recognize the very generous support of our partners. Specifically, on behalf of the board, management, and staff of the CDF, I would like to place on record our appreciation to our existing partners, the GIZ, especially Mr. Simon Zellner and Mr. Robert Weeks, who's our Master of Ceremonies, The CARICOM Secretariat Energy Unit, especially Dr. Devon Gardner, for their unstinting support, confidence, and guidance in getting us to this important milestone. Allow me also to formally thank the consultants, Camco Clean Energy, an FCA authorized fund manager and Green Climate Fund accredited entity, and special mention in that regard to Jeff Sinclair, Alex Joubert, and River Providence for their input and guidance throughout this process of building the CRAF model and architecture. And of course, I cannot help but single out among my competent and very dedicated staff at the CDF for public expression of my gratitude for their commitment and professional effort on this project. Mr. Wayne Vitalis, our financial controller, who is here with us today despite his challenges, Mr. Eugene Williams, our resource mobilization officer, and Dr. Laverne McFarlane, our senior economist, who have all worked tirelessly over the last couple of years to help bring this product to fruition. I must also make special mention of Mr. Kwesi Worrell, an intern financed by the GIZ through the TAPSEC program, whose input has been instrumental to the organization of this launch event. In closing, I am particularly pleased that the CRAF is being launched jointly with CRI's project preparation facility. This is an indication of the type of partnership that needs to be forged to leverage complementarities across the work of regional institutions in CARICOM. This partnership will be cemented by the signing of a cooperation agreement later this morning. It is also very significant for us to be launching the CRAF in Barbados, because during the CDF's first contribution cycle, Barbados was a net contributor to the resources of the CDF. During this current cycle, there is a keen mutual interest in making some of the resources of the fund available to Barbados, particularly within the context of implementation of the CARICOM cohesion policy. I am therefore very encouraged by the presence of Prime Minister Motley, Minister Simmons, and key stakeholders from the private sector as we continue to engage Barbados in discussion on the CRAF as one of the countries identified to be part of the pilot phase. I am optimistic about the future for this initiative, as joining us online are other ministers of energy and various regulatory bodies across the region. This is a clear indication of the commitment of member states to overcome the barriers to driving investments in sustainable energy as we continue to develop these partnerships in building out the project pipeline. Thanks again to all our distinguished in-person attendees, stakeholders, and interested parties joining us online for contributing to the successful launch of this product, one which we expect to unlock some of the latent economic development potential of our member countries, to catalyze a greater level of domestic investment in sustainable energy, and to foster an increased and more sustained level of participation by local financial institutions in the energy sector. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Sumer, for those very comprehensive opening remarks. And just before I introduce our next speaker, let me say there are some positive benefits to the global pandemic, COVID-19. You may ask, what are those benefits? Well, if there was no COVID-19, the project preparation facility would have been launched in May of this year, and the CRAF facility would have been launched in August of this year at two separate times. What it did, it afforded the staff of these two very forward-looking institutions to retool, rethink, and really utilize their synergies, which is really reflective of what Caribbean people can do and the innovativeness. As I introduce the next speaker, the Executive Director of CRI, Dr. Gary Jackson, just let me say that CRI has had a very long gestation period. They had stakeholder meetings right across the region back, I believe it was in 2014, but it was not until 2015 that it was finally established. Dr. Jackson, of course, can give you the relevant details, but it was, again, not until 2018 when the entity became fully operational, and that was when Dr. Jackson was appointed. It is headquartered in Barbados and has a headquarters agreement with the government of Barbados, which was ratified in 2018. Without further ado, Dr. Jackson, I invite you to the podium to deliver your remarks.
The Right Honourable Mia Moore Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment. I'm so happy that you're here, ma'am. Bless. The Honourable Kerry Simmons, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Thank you, sir, for being here. Senator the Honourable Rawdon Adams. Senator the Honourable Lynette Holder, who is joining us via live stream. To our Executive Board of the CRAF, who are also joining us live stream. To Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General, CARICOM Secretariat, who is also joining us live stream. Mr. Ronald Osuma, Chief Executive Officer, CARICOM Development Fund, my brother. To Andrew Gittings, Permanent Secretary Acting, Ministry of Energy and Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Barbados. Thank you, sir, for being here. Mr. Simon Zellner, Program Manager, Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, TAPSEC. Thank you for being here, Simon, our partner. Heads of regional institutions and international organizations, member of the Diplomatic Corps, CARICOM colleagues, members of the media, my CARICOM brothers and sisters who are joining us also via the social media. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. People, policy, plan, project, partnership. That's what I want to speak to you about today. People are the core to what we do at the CRAF and for all our regional institutions as well. Our human capital is really what's more important to us. For them to survive this pandemic, for them to survive these economic challenges that is upon us. We are now experiencing the earthquake and the tsunami is to come. We have to find the right mechanism, the right platform, and an enabling environment to support our people. They are necessary for economic development. We are the future. Our children are the future's future. It is very important that we build capacity from within, and it's very important that we connect with our brothers and sisters, leaving no man behind. This race is not for the swift, but the ones who endure. And we have recognized 2020 as a period of challenges, and we are not sure what 2021 will offer. But what we do know, we are here, and we are still able to drive the change that we so seek. So policy is what's going to help us to give us some direction as the foundation for an appropriate legislative and regulatory construct. We have to use that policy based on our people. It informs their lives, it encourages, it transforms. It will be part of the energy transition that we so seek for our survival. But the policy cannot stand alone. The policy will need to have some enabling functions, that legislative and regulatory, to give it teeth, to make it an action that can transform the lives of our people. But in building that policy, we need to have a plan that is effective, a plan that converts, that builds our sustainable energy platform, a plan that is so good that is going to transform our energy sector to one that is climate resilient, one that is sustainable, affordable, focusing on improving the lives of our people. A plan that builds on that resilient component. The CRAF has right now institutionalized an integrated resource and resilience planning function, and we are now supporting 5 member states through this process, namely Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Belize, and Belize, and who else? What's the other one? Jamaica. How could I forget I'm from Jamaica? And what this plan is going to do is looks on 25 to 30 year horizon. And we are going to try to look at all the different facets of energy, both on the supply side and on the demand side. What does that mean? Countries have set targets for themselves, and they have set bold and ambitious targets. Prime Minister, I know you are pushing your team for that 2030 goal of 100%. That means all hands on deck, leaving no man behind. So I know you have a passion, Prime Minister, for the small man. So we speak about the small and medium enterprises. They are a big part of that solution, and Mr. Suma would have indicated about the credit risk abatement facility, which is going to help that small man to not be intimidated by the financial institutions, but to know that they have a project through our project preparation facility that is going to help them to get to that finish line and to be a part of that solution that is going to transform their lives and the lives of their neighbors. But out of that plan, we need to have those projects that can meet the financial rigor that is required for them to be able to get to fruition. Projects that is going to need capital, that we need to develop risk profiles on to ensure that they have mitigated those risks, that will see them providing deliverance, providing energy, saving energy, and delivering on the promise. These projects are going to go through a series of iterations. We want to ensure through the project preparation facility that we understand what these projects need. Pre-feasibility study, economic and social safeguard. We want to also include gender, because we think gender inclusion is going to be critical for the transformation. Again, leaving no man behind. So from the projects, we need to have strong partnerships. So I'm very happy to be standing here before you, to be signing later this morning a cooperation agreement with the CARICOM Development Fund with Mr. Rodinal Suma to show the ties that we'll have across the region. And we want to create more partnerships between our regional institutions, between our member states, between our thematic hubs that are operating in our ecosystem, between our national focal institutions who are part of our ecosystems, for us to drive that transformation and that transition that we require to survive these economic challenges. So I just want to leave you with this. People, policy, plan, project, partnership, a critical part of our DNA. We speak about PPP, now we speak about PPPPP. It is what's going to drive the change. This is what's going to be necessary for us to survive these economic challenges. I want to thank you, our development partners, for being part of our program. Thank you to the GIZ, thank you to the EU, thank you to the Kingdom of Spain, to ADA, and to all our development partners, and in particular CARICOM Secretariat, for the work that they have done in putting this institution together, and for our member states to know that you are the shareholders of this institution. You have an equity in this organization, and we want to ensure that value is added to your lives and to your country's lives. I want to also take the opportunity to thank the security team for putting this with the CDF team together. Thank you so much. They say we are the kids on the block, the new kids on the block, but I think you have demonstrated that you are here to stay and you are committed to the cause. Thank you, Sophia, for your work. Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Penny. And thanks to all the team members who are here and who are actually listening to us. Some of them are in office. They are listening to us online. And we are very happy for the work that they have put in, and we are hoping that we can continue to engage you, persons who are listening to us online, engage you all in transforming the lives of our people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for your opening remarks, very focused and giving us some idea as to where CRAF, with its very talented team, is headed. The region has very high hopes for CRAF, and I know that CRAF has the ability to deliver on all of these hopes and aspirations for the region. Without further ado, I will now introduce Mr. Simon Zellner, Program Manager for the Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean. But before I do, I just want to say that this program, which is known by its acronym more widely, TAPSEC, is really supporting not only the CARICOM member states, but also the CARIFORM countries within the wider context of the Caribbean and EU partnerships. I know that Mr. Zellner will speak very specifically and give you some ideas what TAPSEC is hoping to do. But TAPSEC works very closely with the CARICOM Secretariat with their full support, and they have also worked very closely, as you would have heard from both the institutions today, in terms of assisting them along their journey. Without further ado, Mr. Zellner.
Thank you, Robert. Honorable Mia Moore-Motley, Prime Minister of Barbados and Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment. Honorable Carrie Simmons, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Senator Honorable Rodham Adams, His Excellency Ambassador David Cummingson, Ambassador to CARICOM. Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General from the CARICOM Secretariat, Mr. Rodinald Zuma, CEO of the CARICOM Development Fund, Gary Jackson, Executive Director of the CRAF, Mr. Andrew Gittens, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, heads of regional and international organizations, CARICOM colleagues, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, guten Morgen, good morning. I bring greetings on behalf of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für internationale Zusammenarbeit, in short GIZ, the implementing agency of the European Union and the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, funded Technical Assistance Program for Sustainable Energy in the Caribbean, or better known with its acronym TAPSEC, with the aim of increasing and improving access to modern, affordable and sustainable energy services to the benefit of all Caribbean citizens. The TAPSEC works in collaboration with the energy program of the CARICOM Secretariat, the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, CRAF, the Ministry of Energy and Mines in the Dominican Republic, and key regional institutions such as the Caribbean Development Fund. Along with our partners, TAPSEC is supporting the region's transition to sustainable, climate resilient, low-carbon future through the modernization of country-specific renewable energy and energy efficiency policies and frameworks, the development of the capacities of CARICOM citizens and institutions to develop technical renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions, and the initiation of innovative financing mechanisms that will provide financing solutions for sustainable energy projects throughout the region. With its vast renewable energy potential, CARICOM member states are well poised to transition from a dependence on fossil fuels to clean and affordable forms of renewable energy. Still, as we know, it takes robust partnerships, technical capacity, strong networks, and a well-resourced and equipped ecosystem to turn this potential into power. And so today, TAPSEC is exceptionally pleased to join with the CRAF and CDF in launching the Project Preparation Facility and the Credit Risk Abatement Facility. Sustainable energy projects are often fragmented and at times relatively small scale. As a result, they generate high transaction costs for lenders and a relatively high risk perception for financiers. These key factors contribute significantly to a dearth of investment-ready renewable energy projects within the Caribbean community. The PPF and CRAF will enable renewable energy investments and project development by addressing barriers to finance of otherwise viable projects, thereby unlock the substantial renewable energy potential in CARICOM member states and promoting wider renewable energy development. These two catalytic initiatives, the first of its kind within the region, will develop local capacity, transform ideas to innovation, forge a robust enabling environment to accelerate investment in clean energy at speed and scale, and support the Caribbean community in achieving its set climate and sustainability goals. We know that the issue of energy lies firmly at the center of our lives, businesses, industries, and economies. Energy is the core of governance as CARICOM member states chart their way forward. At the heart of safety and resilience, as nations build resistance to natural disasters, and the core of education as we model the critical needs for sustainability for our future leaders, and at the center of quality of lives as nations strive to increase energy access to those in rural and often under-resourced communities. Today, as months of efforts come to fruition, as we launch the PPF and CRAF, I envision significant improvement in national and regional technical capacity among both private and public institutions and stakeholders, and foresee several catalytic technological solutions that will harness indigenous renewable energy resources, maximize energy efficiency, minimize environmental impact, and boost human economic development. The TAPSEC is happy to have supported the design and operationalization of the CRAF and PPF, as well as the institutional capacity development of CRI and the CDF. In the case of the PPF, the support was provided together with Get Invest and PFAN, which are other global multi-donor funded projects. And as we move on forward now, I pledge the GIZ's continued support to ensure successful implementation and impact of the PPF and CRAF, and reaffirm our commitment to all our partners as we work together to secure the Caribbean community's energy future. And finally, I would like to congratulate both CDF and CRI for reaching this stage today, launching PPF and CRAF, and wish a successful future cooperation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Zellner, and thank you for that commitment to the region in terms of continued support for these two facilities. At this time, we have a small departure from the printed agenda because, again, of the COVID pandemic. We will now see a short video from the Assistant Secretary General of CARICOM, Mr. Joseph Cox.
The members of the Cabinet of the Government of Barbados, Dr. Gary Jackson, Executive Director of the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Efficiency, CRAF, Mr. Rodney Masumo, Chief Executive Officer of the CARICOM Development Fund, CDF, members of the Diplomatic Corps, on site in Barbados and online. It is with a great sense of pride that I speak to you on what is a landmark occasion for the energy sector within the Caribbean community, the co-launching of the Project Preparation Facility, PPF, and the Credit Risk Abatement Facility, CRAF. Energy security is a major challenge and impediment to the competitiveness for many Caribbean island states. The region suffers from a near total dependence on imported petroleum products for both transportation and electricity. Inadequate energy governance and regulatory structures, the relative small size of the individual markets, and outdated generating equipment and transmission networks contribute to a vicious cycle that discourages investment in the region. The result is expensive, unreliable, and carbon-intensive electricity. The frequently high cost and consistently volatile prices of fuel divert hard currency away from economic development. Indeed, oil imports account for anywhere between 10 and 20% of the region's GDP, reduces competitiveness across almost all economic sectors, and renders the energy sector vulnerable to supply shocks. Simultaneously, the region has access to an abundance of renewable and other sustainable energy resources. These alternatives have the potential to diversify the energy matrix, reducing the region's dependence on imported petroleum products while enhancing reliability and even lowering electricity costs over the long run. Achieving the appropriate balance of baseload renewables, for example geothermal energy, and intermittent sources, for example solar and wind power, will be critical to meet future demand and rising electricity tariffs throughout the region. When judiciously combined with measures to enhance energy efficiency and distributed energy resources, greater use of multiple clean energy alternatives can provide a stable and lower-cost solution that will boost the region's competitiveness and reduce the vulnerability to high and volatile fuel prices. The integration of sustainable energy solutions requires changes to the energy sector's business model. This has consistently presented challenges and to take advantage of the options and opportunities for sustainable energy deployment. Numerous market adjustments, including policy and regulatory reforms, will be critical. But it is the establishment of a pipeline of high-quality, bankable projects, especially within the small, disaggregated markets of the region, that will serve to reduce much of the perceived risks and the transaction costs that are necessary for greater access to investment capital. In that regard, the establishment of a project preparation facility that can serve as a pumping modality that efficiently and effectively moves projects from idea to investment represents the holy grail for the sector. It is estimated that collectively the region requires around $20 billion to meet the stated CSRM's target for a 47% renewable contribution to power generation over the next 8 years. This translates to between 3.5% and 12% of GDP for the individual countries. The energy efficiency opportunities too require around $4 billion in investment over the same 8-year period. As a case in point, the identified opportunities within residential, public, commercial, tourism, and industrial sectors in 5 countries, Barbados, Belize, Grenada, Jamaica, and St. Lucia, require approximately $1 billion in total investment and could result in an average savings of 23% of energy use, or approximately $300 million per year, with a payback of 3.6 years. There are heightened market risks due to a small economies of scale, lack of experience with renewables, the macroeconomic circumstances in our respective countries, among other factors. Reality too is a relatively low international credit rating of most of our countries, which reduces investor appetite for project financing and results in excessive collateral requirements and high interest terms for loans when available. The emergence of the credit risk of the facility to de-risk lending and enhance clean energy investment for SMEs is a critical plank within the arsenal of creative financing strategies and innovative fiscal tools that can endear project owners with the ability to attract the right quantity and quality of capital required for their implementation. The ideas at the CRAF is one of the mechanisms that are within the mix of available options that are based on global, regional, bilateral, and national, or even community-based solutions which are needed to positively transform the energy systems within CARICOM. When taken together, the expectation is that the project preparation facility will improve the quantity and quality of the projects that are available to commercial lending institutions, and the risk abatement provided by the CRAF will serve to increase the proportion of these projects that receive debt financing. We will robustly monitor and track the performance of these facilities with the intent to make adjustments where and when necessary, so that we will continually meet the needs of the sustainable energy markets within the member states. Today, the CARICOM Secretariat, which plays its role in conceiving these two facilities, stands as a very proud parent, knowing that they will make the energy landscape within the region better than it has ever been. Ladies and gentlemen, with that, I thank you.
We thank Assistant Secretary General Joseph Cox for those words. I do not really know how to introduce the next speaker, who is in fact our keynote speaker, the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley, who happens as well to be the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs and Investment. This ministry, is, of course, has a very keen interest in all that has been said before, but as I introduce the Honorable Prime Minister, I look for a few words. She has probably been referred to by several things, but I believe never before has she been referred to as a missionary. She has been a missionary for the sustainable energy environment. She has been also a missionary for small island development states. And without further ado, as we are at this joint launch of these two facilities who are fit for purpose, I now introduce the Honorable Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Amor Motley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure how to take that introduction as being described as a missionary. Suffice it to say that all things being equal, I could accept it, Kerry, so long as it's not a mission impossible. The truth is that as I sat there wondering what I would say to you, I reflected on the fact that this region has been having these discussions for simply too long. And the question begs itself, why have the discussions gone on for so long? And why have we not seen the level of critical progress that we would normally have expected given the excitement, intensity, and passion surrounding these discussions for almost a decade? One could stretch beyond the decade, but let's leave it there. And more often than not, it comes down to a combination of lack of access to capital, lack of capacity to persuade persons that the projects are viable, and regulatory arbitrage that will cause you to want to cry. We have today put before us two of the critical components that have been reflected as obstacles. A lot of the younger and smaller people who want to get into this industry have been confronted with the difficulty of what they're preparing and how they're preparing. And to that extent, the product being launched here this morning for the project preparation facility is welcomed because it will aid in areas where there is a clear need. Similarly, the credit risk abatement facility is intended to make pure or holy that which is neither pure nor holy for the commercial banks primarily, and to a lesser extent for some of the investment banks for larger projects. The truth is that the last time I spoke on behalf of the CARICOM Development Facility, it was at the Accra Hotel, asking for the region to begin to consider the notion of the issuance of some kind of innovative financial instruments that would allow us to focus on resilience and growth within this region. Regrettably, there has not been much progress made in that regard, and it does not allow us to ignore the fact that the CARICOM Development Fund is still not sufficiently capitalized to play the development role that we need it to play in this region, as was contemplated by the drafters and settlers of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, largely because it is impossible for you to have a single market and single economy without there being winners and without there being losers. And Chapter 7 was conceptualized as that leveling chapter that would make it possible for those who came from regions that were disadvantaged, or sectors that were disadvantaged, or countries that were disadvantaged, to believe that the regional project would provide a development framework for you that would allow for access to development finance predominantly in order to meet the challenges first presented by a single market and single economy, but of necessity presented by the environment within which we live. And I go back to this point of challenges because the one thing that has gotten clearer as we have spent time talking about these issues is the extent of the challenge which we face, which is the climate crisis. I don't speak anymore about climate change because to speak of change might suggest some level of neutrality in terms of what the consequences might be. I speak in terms of a climate crisis. And I recognize that the world in which we live and the human race to which we belong tends to act more in times of crises than in times of relative calm. Indeed, the fact that the Bretton Woods institutions came out of the Second Great War of the 20th century is known to us all. What perhaps is less known is that the creation of the US Federal Reserve, which is at the center of the world's financial system today, that owed its emergence to the financial panic and was created as a result of that 1907 financial panic. Or that the corporate accounts, the practice of corporate accounts that we have, was a response to the first global financial crisis of 1857. I say these things because more often than not, it is the crisis that drives us with a determination that the mission must be completed and that it is not a mission impossible. And to that extent, therefore, I ask myself, what is it that needs to be done in order to be able to make this a reality for us? Barbados imported just under, that's about 7% of GDP in fossil fuels last year, about $728 million, just over 7%. And this is in spite of the fact that we want to make haste quickly, not slowly. But we have come to the recognition that there is going to have to be an interventionist role for the state if we are going to make the progress that we want to make by 2030. And what do I mean by that? The price of oil dropped to negative prices at the beginning of this year. If we were simply to rely on the financial return for renewable energy, then we would put these projects on pause. But for us, it is not simply about a financial return. For us, it is about survival. And for us, it is about a capacity to maintain our countries as we know them. And to that extent, what will happen is that a determination will be made that the economic benefits and the benefits for national security justify our involvement in the areas of renewable energy, even at this time as we speak, when the prices of oil have not necessarily reached the levels that would justify in all aspects a financial return. This is a serious conversation to have because in many instances it is going to require some level of intervention on the part of the state if we are going to see any action that is appreciable over the course of the next few years while the price of oil remains depressed. For us, as I said, it is fundamentally an issue of survival. And it has meant that we will have to discuss whether in truth and in fact we may need as a country to recognize that there is a cost to smallness and there is a cost to our wanting to survive, and that cost will be borne by us all by making the transition to renewable energy. I stay on this point largely because anyone who is focused on numbers and numbers alone may well argue that it is still cheaper to use fossil fuel in some instances, but the extent to which fossil fuel erodes the foundation upon which we stand is significant. I also want us to recognize that the policy decisions of the state and companies matter. With respect to the companies, the two products being launched here are intended to give you the comfort that it is okay for you to literally make the transition, because these two products are intended to help you get from idea to investment. But at the level of the state, there are critical decisions that have been made and will continue to be made. In our own instance in Barbados, we have determined that yes, by 2030, we want at best fossil fuel free, at worst carbon neutral, recognizing that we don't live on our own in this world. But those things over which we have control, then we ought to be able to make the transition. It has meant that at the level of our own cabinet, that we have made a number of decisions recently, recognizing that one of the key transformational aspects of renewable energy as well is the potential for democratization of ownership of assets and the pursuit of economic enfranchisement, which remains one of the major goals of almost all post-independence governments in the Caribbean. I refer specifically to the ability to utilize the assets of homeowners in order to be able to leverage that asset to earn for them. In our case, we have just agreed to the establishment of a company called Hope Inc. And Hope Inc. will essentially undertake housing and will enter arrangements for those homeowners, potential homeowners who are interested in being able to access land at or property, I should say, at significantly subsidized prices by assigning the rights to their roof for those who are prepared to put on the photovoltaic panels and hence remove from them the cost of the land that they would otherwise have to find the money for. So put simply, that those potential owners who are prepared to enter a contract to assign the benefits of their roof for energy production through solar photovoltaic panels will then be able to have access to the land on which their house will be built without having to pay for the land. It works out with a modest rate of return for the developer of the housing programs, but what it does is that it allows persons who might otherwise have difficulty in being able to access a mortgage and to afford the price of a house because of where they are in terms of their earning power, that they would now be able to do so. We've also agreed that 25% of the renewable energy market has to be reserved for some areas that are critical to national development but for which funding is difficult. I refer specifically to the water sector, to the area of transport, and to the area of the third sector, which in the Caribbean continues to be that set of charitable entities that are required to close the cracks that exist in our economy. Why water? The British government, when they were our colonizers, and other European governments, I would imagine, would have laid water infrastructure more than a century ago, much of which today is in a very, very poor state. When they laid that, they had the benefit of an empire and all the wealth that flowed therefrom. We have a country, not an empire, and therefore the ability to afford the new pipes that must of necessity go in if we are to reduce the unfortunate state of almost 50% non-revenue water. In other words, water leaking through the pipes because of bursts. If we are to reduce that regrettable number of non-revenue for non-revenue water, then it means that we are going to have to assiduously go about the replacement of pipes across our country. This is all the more so given the impact of the climate crisis on groundwater and the adequacy of groundwater in our nation. We therefore do not have the luxury of agreeing that so much water can simply run out of our pipes on a daily basis or run into the ocean. The government of Barbados has therefore agreed that 15% of the renewable energy market will be reserved for the Barbados Water Authority to act either singularly or collaboratively with whom it so wishes in a joint venture in order to be able to ensure that there is a solid revenue stream for the Barbados Water Authority so that it may literally confront the challenges of distribution and augmentation as a result of the climate crisis over the course of the next 20 to 25 years, which we believe is the minimum time necessary in order to replace the 2,500 kilometers of pipe that we have on this island. To put it and give it context, when we became the government, less than 1.5% of our pipe had been replaced over the course of the last 2 decades. The third area relates to the choice of transport, and the government and the cabinet have agreed that as we move forward and until we finish the consultations with all of the stakeholders as to when we will move to hybrid and electric vehicles nationally, that the government itself does not need to wait for the outcome of those discussions in order to make the decision that we will purchase electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles as we go forward from 2020 onwards. This is a critical decision because it lies within our very power to do so. The governments are being asked to find too much money to be able to deal with aspects of the climate crisis, for us to continue by our actions contributing to the reliance on fossil fuels. And to that extent, therefore, I'm happy to lead a cabinet that has recognized that it is critical that we make this decision to be able to procure vehicles that are hybrid or electric going forward, rather than being an accessory to the crime of climate genocide. My friends, I've spent a few minutes telling you and sharing with you on these matters, largely because talk is cheap. And it is only when the rubber hits the ground that we are going to see change. For us, we know that scale is required in order for transformation to happen. We are not yet at that point of scale in the region. But I want to salute these two regional organizations because I believe that their efforts are pushing the rest of the governments where we need to go with greater haste. Their efforts are pushing the rest of corporate Caribbean, whether small, medium, or large, to go where we need to go with greater haste. We cannot continue to make the case that we are on the front line of the climate crisis, but yet our policy decisions do not reflect the fact sufficiently that we need to make haste. We are on, for sure, a path that we want to do it. But if we take so long to do it, then others will begin to doubt their own role in bringing order to our condition. And what do I mean by that? The international community is whom we are asking to stick to their obligations as committed to in Paris, which even then are not sufficient to guarantee our survival, but they are better than anything or nothing. We want the international community to recognize, for example, that flesh has to be brought to the Warsaw Mechanism on loss and damage, because if we are not the ones contributing, and if we are to stay faithful to the principle of the polluter pays, or if we are to stay faithful to the principles that underlie most private international, private commercial law and tortious law, then it is critical that we engage them on this point. But our ability to engage with credibility is compromised if, when we can make changes within our own domestic and regional economies, we're not making them with sufficient haste. And that is the simple point that I want to make. I'm not sure that we've served ourselves well enough also, because this is not an area on which there is great or sufficient regional collaboration within the context of the Caribbean community. And while I welcome, Dr. Jackson, your efforts, the truth is that I do believe that the CARICOM Secretariat, and in the context of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, that we may need to look back and see how we can strengthen the framework that will impose upon us greater obligations for coordination and for collaboration than currently exists within the community at this stage. For whatever reason, energy was pretty much not a focus of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas when it was settled. It is regrettable because energy as it was contemplated then was predominantly seen as fossil fuel energy. Energy as we must see it today for our own sustainability has to be on the basis of renewable energy. It is against that background that I repeat the call that I made in Trinidad earlier this year, in February, at the Energy Conference, for there to be greater collaboration at the regional level and amendments, if necessary, to the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to better facilitate the kind of collaboration and cooperation that I believe to be absolutely essential in this region. If we, like Norman Manley, believe that the Caribbean Sea is our patrimony, and if we believe that the oceans represent one of the best sources of renewable energy going forward, then we cannot leave it to chance as to how we relate to the oceans within the Caribbean community. So that I trust and pray that there will be sufficient political will regionally to put this issue of renewable energy generally, but renewable energy in particular, full and frontally within the context of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas, so that we can move forward with the kind of collaboration that makes sense, given the fact that this ocean, this Caribbean Sea, is really part and parcel of our patrimony, and how we treat to it and who gets what and what obligations we have towards it and what benefits we see accruing from it all have to be settled, and can only be settled through negotiation and settlement of arrangements in a legal framework to which we then agree to be all bound. So I look forward to that kind of engagement. I'm conscious that COVID-19 has put on pause not only your launch of these two products, but so much other things that we ought to have been discussing and preparing and debating in this year 2020. But we have a saying in the Caribbean that what ain't catch you ain't pass you. And to that extent, what is still ahead of us is the opportunity to get it right. And I pray upon the regional officials, the political leadership of the region, and indeed the populations of the region to recognize that it is up to us first and foremost to show that we can take control of the things that fall within our domain before we go to others asking others to help us, because as we must, because they were responsible for the greenhouse gas emissions that have literally put us in this position. I hope, therefore, that the continued discussions throughout the region will lead us to that next position, and that we will find ourselves at that rendezvous, and that I can tell the Master of Ceremonies that I associated myself, yes, with a mission, but fundamentally I do not believe it to be a mission impossible if we come together and do the things that we say we want to do rather than simply talking the talk. The time for us now is to walk the walk, because time is running out. Thank you.
Madam Prime Minister, thank you for those words of enlightenment. I think that we all know that you as a person are someone who believes in walking the walk. And I am very grateful to you for having taken time out of your extremely busy schedule, knowing what is ahead of you domestically, to have spent some time with us this morning in the launch of this facility. I think you represent the embodiment of the Caribbean people at this juncture in its history, as recognizing that we as a people have our own destinies in our hands and that we can do it. And I want to reiterate that the staff of the two organizations who are presenting these facilities, by their very nature, I can see that they are confident in their own abilities, and likewise with CARICOM Secretariat and the private sector and the public sector will lead the region to bigger and better things. At this point, the next item that we have will be the presentation of the project preparation facility by CRAF. The presentation is a PowerPoint presentation which will be done by Ms. Charlene Bodley. But before she starts that, I just want to say to you that the Honourable Prime Minister, because of very pressing and prior engagements, will have to leave at the end of this. But we know that she is very much still an evangelist, and we thank her for her time and dedication here. Unfortunately, we started late, so we do have to allow the Prime Minister to leave at this point in time to address the matters of state. We thank you, Prime Minister. Madam Prime Minister, thank you. I will now continue with our agenda, and we now ask Charlene to take over. Thank you.
The Honorable Kerry Simmons, Minister of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship. Senator, the Honorable Lynette Holder, joining via live stream. Mr. Joseph Cox, Assistant Secretary General, CARICOM Secretariat, joining via live stream. Mr. Rodinal Suma, Chief Executive Officer, CDF. Dr. Gary Jackson, Executive Director, CRAF, Dr. Devon Gardner, Head of CARICOM Energy Unit, Mr. Andrew Gittins, Permanent Secretary, Special Assignment, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, Barbados, Mr. Simon Zeller, Program Manager of TAPSEC, heads of regional and international organizations, members of the Diplomatic Corps, CARICOM colleagues, members of the media, colleagues of the CRAF and CDF, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. As I present a bit on the project preparation facility of the CRAF, I will begin by presenting a bit on the value proposition of the CRAF and how we connect the dots, and in particular how the PPF contributes to that value proposition. I will then take you into how the PPF is meeting the region's needs, and we've been challenged to do so in haste by some of the previous presentations. And then I will take you through the offerings, the service offerings of the PPF, the business process and eligibility, and focus a little on the partnership and how that works out of the CRAF. So CRAF executes its mandate through 7 core strategic program areas, including capacity building, knowledge management, sustainable buildings, energy access, to name a few, but I will focus on finance and project support. And under this strategic program area, the PPF, Project Preparation Facility, is a flagship project. And the PPF seeks to respond to our region's project development needs. And in January of this year, the CRAF would have conducted a needs assessment for both the private and public sector across the CARICOM region, and highlighted some of the needs, the major needs that would have emanated from that exercise. So, financing mechanisms to match RE and EE projects in the region stood out as you would have imagined, as the main requirement. And that in itself, though, is not a panacea. We would have heard from the Honorable Prime Minister 3 main areas, and that leads me to the second on screen, which is the legal and enabling environment. So policy that will enable these projects to be successfully implemented. And so the PPF stands ready to provide support in that area as well. Capacity building is going to be a key offering of the PPF through its services, and that would enable our project developers to build expertise, and so we would have a cadre of professionals who are able to successfully develop project documentation. And through the public sector, one of the major needs that came out of that assessment was a desire of our government agencies to receive support in the development of pilot projects. So how are we at the CRAF connecting the dots? Apart from the 7 strategic program areas, earlier this year, the CRAF did what we call a little pivoting, where we brought to focus 4 of our main programs. The first being integrated resource and resilience plans. That's the IRRP process. And that process entails energy sector planning and yields a pipeline of investment projects. The CEKH, the CARICOM Energy Knowledge Hub, basically a data repository offering knowledge exchange and best practices. And to the star of the day, the Project Preparation Facility, which provides that support to bridge the gap between projects that are already in development but are unsure to investment. And so to connect the dots between the PPF and the IRP process yielding that pipeline of projects will now feed into the PPF to receive technical assistance and advisory services to have these projects move along the pipeline and be ready for investment. And with the CEKH, it is really a bi-directional relationship, that there is information flow, best practices, and data repository activities flowing in both directions. And last but not least, communications and public relations mainstreamed across all other 3 programs and across all our activities at the CRI. Promoting the CRI's corporate identity is going to be very important for the PPF, as the PPF will interact directly with stakeholders, bringing the message out there, doing these calls, whether it be country-specific or general calls to have these projects come through the facility, will hinge largely on the success of our communications. And you would have heard from Dr. Jackson earlier the importance that we place on the 4 Ps: people, policy, planning, and project, and I won't repeat that point. And just to provide some further justification for the setting up of the PPF and its functionality, is its function of de-risking. And that, of course, provides some hindrances in projects being developed in the region. And because we not only focus on project developers and also finance institutions, understanding the role of project development support, both through the PPF and the CRAF, is important for considering de-risking. And so the PPF supports projects in getting finance through 5 main areas. The first being the provision of technical assistance and advisory services, and might I add that our web portal for the PPF to receive project applications is now live, and thankfully we launched today. And as PM says, we take on the challenge of making haste, and so we are happy to invite projects that require these services. Another service that will be provided by the PPF is matchmaking services through specialized investment and business promotion forum. Likewise, in a spirit of regional collaboration, the maintenance and expansion of a regional project pipeline to showcase economies of scale and thus enable us to more effectively attract funding for these projects. And related to that, cooperation with global, regional, and by regional I also include Latin America. So to collaborate with programs, projects, initiatives that are on the ground that can support the work of the PPF, and we will do that through cooperation agreements. Our first cooperation agreement for the PPF being signed today with the CRAF. And lastly, it will provide support to our financial institutions to build capacity in sustainable energy projects and developing financial instruments to support them. In fact, a little over a month ago, the CRI was happy to collaborate with the CDF, and we put on a 2-day training for financial institutions, a sensitization training that introduced the 2 facilities and other services offered by both institutions. Success of the PPF will hinge largely on partnerships, and today is just a first example of this, our partnership with the CRAF. Through the establishment of the PPF, we have partnered with 3 programs, Get Invest, PFAN, and TAPSEC. And throughout the operation, and might I add, my list is not exhaustive, but through the operation, we intend to partner with a number of agencies, including those on screen, so the CDB, CDF, CRAF, Caribbean Export, Climate Smart Accelerator, financial institutions, development banks, private sector associations, government agencies, just to name a few. I think it's important that we highlight a bit of the partnership that has made this possible for us to launch the facility today. So Get Invest and PFAN, our main partners in doing the work to design and establish, to conceptualize and establish the project preparation facility. and they will continue to journey with us at the CRAF in the forward movement with what we would call a commissioning period, which begins today at this launch. So we will now open up the private sector stream of the facility and work very hard and with immediate effect to have seeding projects go through that facility ahead of 2021. And the TAPSEC, and I've stated that they've provided funding support, but I also need to state that they have provided some technical support and even moral support in the establishment of the facility. And so now to, I would say, the most important stakeholders, those which we will serve through the services of the facility, who is eligible, what categories of projects would be eligible for support under the facility. By large renewable energy projects, also hybrid systems with an adequate share of RE. Also energy efficiency, and we've often referred to that as low-hanging fruit, and the truth is we have not done our best in the region to pick those low-hanging fruits, and so the facility stands ready. Some of the services would include energy audits, energy management programs, among others, and nexus applications. We heard the Honorable Prime Minister mention water. So that nexus between energy and water, energy and health, especially given the current and uncanny COVID pandemic situation. Energy and gender. Gender is mainstreamed, by the way, through all the programs at the CRAF, and the PPF will be no exception. And also e-mobility, so the transport sector, and food and agriculture. And lastly, project types would include greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up projects. And so, as I mentioned, we will start today with the private sector project stream. That in no way excludes the public sector. In fact, we are in the process of developing our business plan to accommodate the public sector project stream, which will come on board in early of 2021. So for now, we welcome projects that show some level of potential to achieve commercial and technical viability. That's the private sector. And we welcome project applications from private sector developers, project owners, integrators, NGOs, private sector components of PPPs, and mixed capital companies. And so to the diagram on the right, essentially, while we will not require, or we wouldn't turn away projects that don't have a sure economic model, it would be important for projects to have at least contemplated these main areas. So a project site, resource, offtake, permits, technology, project team, and capital needs. And where capital needs are concerned, the efforts of both the PPF and the CRAF will allow projects to attract the capital required to implement the projects. And so our business process can be summarized in 4 main categories. First being lead origination, so how we get projects into the facility, and outreach. I already mentioned PR and comms, and that we do have a robust framework for that already. We may, as I mentioned, at intervals do country-specific or technology-specific calls to the PPF. And that would take us to the selection of projects, which, of course, the first step would be to establish eligibility of the projects coming through the facility, and through an evaluation committee, decide which projects may require a bit more work or more information submitted. And once all is well, projects now are inducted into the pipeline, and that would move us into the third stage, which would be the provision of services to these projects in 2 main categories, that is advisory services and targeted technical assistance. And that is where we will lean very, very much on the CRAF. So Once these projects come through the facility, and again, the CRAF and the CRAF will work closely in a manner that's beneficial to both, and of course to our stakeholders. So as the CRAF receives projects, we do anticipate that some of these projects would require the technical assistance and advisory services that are provided by the facility. And so that link between the CRAF and the CRAF would go back to stage number 1, which is project origination. While we at the CRAF, once we're at stage number 3, projects that require that support to unlock the financial capital through the credit risk abatement facility, these projects would then feed into the CRAF. So I think if that illustration was not a clear indication of the benefit of this collaboration, what will be, right? And lastly, project promotion of projects, which would include matchmaking services, project teasers, and project prospectus. And that hopefully would lead us to having projects which are investment-ready investors investing in these projects, debt financing provided to have these projects implemented. And my last slide gives an indication of our timeline. And I think this is important so that we ensure that the message is very clear that the facility stands ready to receive projects from the public sector come 2021. So we are here today with the launch of the private sector stream. Between November and March of 2021, we proceed to develop our business plan for the public sector and to seed the facility with seed projects. And very, very important during that stage would be our efforts at stakeholder mapping, stakeholder engagement, and building partnerships and signing more cooperation agreements to take immediate effect. And then by the end of March 2021, you can look forward to hearing from us again as we launch the second stream, which is the public sector stream of the project. And that would take us to April 2021, where we end our commissioning period and we have a fully functional, fully operational project preparation facility. And lastly, I just invite you to enjoy a very brief video presentation in the form of an animation that would summarize all what we have been speaking about where the PPF is concerned.
The Project Preparation Facility, or PPF, is a project development support resource designed to help you advance the preparation of sustainable energy projects so that they can successfully attract financing. The PPF not only provides advice and technical assistance, but also helps to link bankable projects to investors and financiers, and serves as a pathway to much-needed financial investment. If you are a project owner, private sector developer, part of an NGO or similar enterprise seeking to advance a sustainable energy project in the CARICOM member states, then you may qualify for support. The Project Preparation Facility supports medium to high capacity renewable energy and energy efficiency technology projects, including biomass and biofuel, biogas, geothermal, ocean technologies, solar PV and thermal, hydropower, energy storage, wind, waste to energy, and greenfield, brownfield, and scale-up enterprises such as energy power generation, efficiency, and solutions projects. For more information on project preparation facility support, visit www.ccreee.org/ppf.
And with that, I thank you for your attention. Our information is on screen. You could visit our website at www.ccree.org/ppf.
Thank you, Ms. Bodley, for that presentation on the project preparation facility. It should enlighten you as to how the facility can be accessed, and all the contact information is either on screen or in your packages for those in person. At this point in time, we will have a video presentation which outlines how the CRAF facility will work. The video presentation by the CDF team.
In the face of rising energy costs, the economic slowdown introduced by a global pandemic, and an increasingly urgent need to respond to climate change threats, businesses and governments across the Caribbean are rethinking how to ensure climate resilience and long-term sustainable development. Across CDF member states, over 87% of all primary energy is currently imported, and 92% of power generation is from expensive fossil fuel sources. Across the region, a switch to renewable energy power generation, combined with a focus on energy efficiency initiatives, will help to reduce national and regional energy costs, build economic and climate resilience, and contribute to long-term sustainable development goals. Small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, are also encouraged to become more energy efficient and implement renewable energy power solutions. But for SMEs, access to credit is a familiar and persistent problem. SMEs often struggle to demonstrate that they are able to repay a loan, and often cannot provide the required kind and amounts of security to unlock the loan from financial institutions. When this situation is combined with the fact that the renewables and energy efficiency sector is relatively new and unknown across the region, there is yet another barrier which limits uptake of these solutions. In addition to citing credit risk concerns among the SME clients, banks and other lenders often report a lack of understanding of, and thus an unwillingness to consider loans for renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. The CARICOM Development Fund has a mandate to contribute to sustainable development goals across the CDF member states. It has designed the Credit Risk Abatement Facility, CRAF, specifically to address these barriers and to unlock additional financing for SMEs that want to benefit from renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions.
Greetings from the St. Lucia Development Bank. My name is Vincent Boland. I'm the Managing Director. We would first of all like to adopt the protocol having been established, but to offer our congratulations and warm greetings to the Prime Minister of Barbados, Ms. Mia Motley. The St. Lucia Development Bank, we are extremely pleased to be partnering with the CARICOM Development Fund to be able to facilitate the rolling out of the Credit Risk Abatement Facility. The facility, once it is in place, will see an expansion of credit and the utilization of funds for persons to make themselves more resilient. Ideally, we are looking to ensure that persons grab this opportunity so that they will be able to ensure their energy efficiency and use of renewable energy is something that they will benefit from. We would like to thank the persons from CAMCO who have assisted in the analysis and the review of some of our pending investees. We would also like to take this opportunity to thank Wayne Vitalis and his team for their interaction with us and making this a possibility. In addition, we would like to thank the CDF and the CRAF for the technical training that we've received so far. To date, we have seen persons trained in renewable energy and energy efficiency techniques, and we expect that going forward that there will be support for the capacity building both internally with our lenders and externally for our customers to understand and appreciate the benefits that they expect to derive by utilizing this particular product. The ultimate goal as well for the St. Lucia Development Bank would be the strengthening and improvement in our portfolio. The fact that we will now have loans that are secured, albeit partially via the credit risk abatement facility, but this will improve our metrics on our facilities and our portfolio. St. Lucia stands to benefit from this excellent opportunity, and we thank all parties who have made this possible. We wish to thank you very much for allowing us to be able to come to your launch this morning, and we wish everybody a pleasant day. Thank you very much.
The CDF is responding to the significant potential and unmet demand for such interventions in CDF countries that it has encountered across its member states. With the launch of CRAF, the CDF is supporting the development of a local renewable energy and energy efficiency market, contributing to SME growth and cost reductions.
Rennick & Company is a major distribution company in St. Lucia, formed in January 1966, almost 55 years ago, by my dad, the late Christopher Rennick. In late 2018, we began investigations on implementing solar PV systems at our properties in both Castries and Vieux-Fort to become more energy efficient. Our project received approval in principle, but stalled because we were unable to provide free and clear assets for the necessary bank security. We attended a meeting when CRAF presented their project in St. Lucia, and after submitting information, Rennick & Company received the news that we were one of 3 companies selected. This included an energy audit at zero cost to us, which is an amazing resource, with numerous recommendations to become more efficient and savvy. The project included rewiring of our main office building, built over 30 years ago, and in dire need of rewiring to meet current standards and put us in a better position to install a 25K and 20K solar system at both our locations. With energy saving at the forefront, this project also included having the company set up with more modern electrical and air conditioning systems. CRAF provided the much-needed safety net for the financial institution by securing the loan to make all this possible for us. We at Rennick are ever so grateful for the assistance and support given through the project by the CRAF team. They made this experience so much better and easier for us because of their efficiency and willingness to work with us to complete the project proposal to satisfaction of the financial institution providing the funding.
Assisting with a green recovery from the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, helping to decrease the region's exposure to oil market volatility and the associated drain on foreign currency reserves, and helping CDF member states to meet the international climate change commitments under the Paris Climate Agreement and transition to more climate resilient economies. CRAF is designed to unlock additional funding for renewable energy and efficiency projects among SMEs using 3 key instruments. Firstly, CRAF's Credit Risk Instrument, CRI, will offer a partial risk guarantee for up to 80% of the outstanding loan value to participating financiers. CRAF will offer guarantees to a wide range of financiers, including commercial banks and development finance institutions. CRAF will also help to grow the market by supporting new and emerging business models in the sector, including energy services companies, ESCOs, and national utilities, offering renewable energy and energy efficiency solutions to the customers through an integrated utility services. Secondly, CRAF's Technical Assistance Program, TAP, will offer bespoke and targeted technical assistance to SMEs, financiers, and service providers. Again, CRAF's TAP seeks to build the market in the region by broad-based approach to capacity development. The TAP may support provision of energy services, for example, technical studies for individual SMEs to define projects, which both the SME and the also support capacity development and skill development for financiers, SMEs, and service providers alike. Wherever possible, provision of technical assistance through CRAF's TAP will be coordinated with other technical assistance facilities, such as CARICOM Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency's Project Preparation Facility, also being launched today. Lastly, CRAF will implement a strong monitoring and evaluation framework so that the impact of CRAF can be measured, reported, and evaluated, and also that key learnings can be shared across the region. It is this ecosystem approach which sets the CRAF apart from other guarantee facilities in the region. The CDF's goal in launching the CRAF is to develop a new sector for renewables and energy efficiency across the region. The CRAF is being launched in a one-year pilot phase for 2021 with a plan for a full-scale rollout in 2022. During the pilot phase, CRAF will operate in only a few countries, but will be available in all CDF member states once fully rolled out. Prior to this, CRAF will seek to build relationships with financial institutions and energy service partners in building out a pipeline of projects throughout the CDF member states to be implemented with the support of the CRAF Credit Risk Instrument and Technical Assistance Program.
Good day, fellow participants. Greetings from DFC Belize. We take this opportunity to congratulate the CDF on the official launching of its Climate Risk Abatement Facility, CRAF. We view this program as a bold one which will foster the promotion of green technologies in the region, particularly renewable energy and energy efficiency. The objectives of the CRAF are consistent with Belize's national climate agenda, including Belize's national determined contributions to the UNFCCC. The program is also well aligned with DFC's Strategic Development Plan, Strategy 2021, Building Resilience Against Climate Change and Economic Volatility. Strategic objective number 1 of this plan is to mainstream climate resiliency in all of DFC's operations, including mitigation and adaptation. It is in this context that DFC launched its REEE lending program in 2017. Similar to the experience in other member states, uptake under this program has been challenged by several factors, including the lack of an appropriate legislative framework, client over-indebtedness and lack of appropriate collateral, lack of knowledge at all levels, including the beneficiary, the service provider, and even at the DFC staff level. We believe very strongly that the CRAF will facilitate overcoming the last 2 barriers through its partial guarantee facility and its technical assistance and knowledge promotion programs. We are currently in the process of negotiating the master guarantee agreement with CRAF, and it's our hope that we will be able to submit eligible projects for CRAF support as soon as these negotiations conclude. We congratulate the CDF for this bold, innovative and visionary program and send our best wishes for its successful implementation. Thank you very much.
The CDF strongly believes that CRAF will help to build a vibrant renewables and energy efficiency market through its ecosystems approach, and by providing this support, will help to deliver positive sustainable development impacts for SMEs and across CDF member states.
Thank you to the CDF team for that presentation, where it explained how the CRAF facility will actually work. At this juncture, just let me congratulate both organizations, the Caribbean Development Fund and the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency, in a successful launch of these 2 facilities. And of course, we welcome the participation and engagement by the public, private sector to access these facilities and make the best in terms of the energy transition across the CARICOM region. We now reach the second part of this morning's event, which represents the official signing of a document, a cooperation agreement between these two organizations, who have of their own volition sought to utilize their various strengths and create tremendous synergies in this sustainable energy environment. And I really want to congratulate them, because very much and very often within the Caribbean, we are seeing and see our organizations as soloed or siloed organizations, just doing what we are supposed to do and not recognizing the tremendous benefits that can be had from cooperation. So I want to salute the two organizations, Mr. Suma and Dr. Jackson, for this initiative on your own. And I now invite you to move across to sign these documents. And while they do this, I ask that you will now listen to a cultural presentation from two Barbadian artists, Miss Linda M. Dean, a spoken word artist who is focused very much on the environmental issues and goes across the country, involved heavily in the schools, and she will be supported by Mr. Victor Tula Lewis on the drums. Please.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Simon.
Can everybody hear me? Yeah?
Yes. Yes, you don't.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Victor, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everybody. I think it's good afternoon now. As I was sitting at the back there listening to all the speeches, I couldn't help thinking that maybe Dr. Jackson and Prime Minister Motley had had a sneak peek at what I'm about to share with you. No matter, I am very happy to share with you fragments from a work in progress that I call the Coral Island Suite. And I'm very happy to be sharing it with Victor Tula Lewis on the Junjun here, and I hope you enjoy. In the crowded city streets, through the village 4-day morning, in the I can't tell the difference between dry and rainy season, in the pulpit, in the rum shop, in the schools and on the block, out the mouths of politicians, in the old folks' talk, on the air and in the papers, in the ghetto-gated hills, in the gullies choked with garbage, in the disappearing fields, in the rage that's all around us, in the hustle and the struggle, the endless chase to put survival on the table, in the papering over cracks, in the choice of ballot boxes, between the crumbling foundations, the hard place, and the rocks. It's in the breeze in search of cane field, in the scorching noonday sun, all where we're walking to the rhythm of the drum. A dreaming coral. A dreaming coral is full of noises. Hear how she trades winds, words, secrets in her sleep, walking deep and dream talking in other worlds, other tongues and rhythms she's been. New day dawning, but island still yawning. Breaking off she neck with slumber, mumbling, grumbling, shouting about something or other on the sargassum shore. A dreaming coral is full of noises, and we should be afeared what moves to make, what route to take when she decides to wake up. Give thanks. Give thanks for a new day, even though by 9 in the morning it'll blind you, make you squint, Feel to shed your skin, the light with its hard talk, unforgiving fire walk, the sun so hot, skinning coffins, melting tar, tin, roof, wood, concrete, and me too, scorching sand that you can't bear to barefoot upon. Sun, the baddest man in a bad man fete, and it ain't even midday yet. Roast your breadfruit right there for you. The walk-up merchants could learn a thing or two. The wind. The wind. November rain come true. Wind, help me conga golden apples off of this roof. And the trees say, sure. And the wind holler back, brother, I glad to. And just like that, 1,000 drummers drumming in and on your head. Wax, plaques, the galvanized that never stood a chance. Water, water, the rain kalimba down. Run this road to a river. Run this land like a river. Run this rock to a river. Rain, rain, rain. Rain know nothing about no new development in the gully below where the roads are named for all the trees that have been cut down. Rain, all he know is sugarcane, and before that, virgin terrain. You cannot fret with memory. You cannot fret with rain. Rain, run this road to a river. Rain, run this rock to a river. Rain, run this land to a river. Rain, rain, rain. You ever notice crashing and landing, waves, crashing and landing, waves, crashing and landing upon themselves. You listen to that traffic down the highway and convince yourself that ain't nothing but waves crashing and landing. And there's comfort in the lie and refuge from the rage of our machines in the remembrance of rivers, oceans, and seas. Island wakes and says, I want to be remembered. I want to be remembered a certain way. All where we walk in, all where we talk in, all how we talking right now, and rain, and sun, and wind, and earth, and air, kalimba down, and junju down, and djembe down, and conga down. Rain, 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 rain. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that entertaining cultural presentation interlude. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now reached that point where we are about to close, and I will now invite Dr. Devon Gardiner, Program Manager for the CARICOM Energy Unit, who has been an essential part of this development exercise, to give you the closing remarks. Dr. Gardiner, sorry.
All protocols observed. All mics sanitized. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct pleasure to bring these proceedings to a close, standing here literally between you and lunch. I want to start by acknowledging the energy of the presentation of the colleagues, the spoken word and the drums. That is indeed the original source of energy that many of us within the Caribbean got our zest from. Of course, while on plantations, much of us depended on the sound waves that emanated from the drums and the spoken word to carry us through. I want to start by framing the whole context of this within the fact that November is CARICOM Energy Month. And so we are sitting here today during a period when we are coalescing and congregating around our achievements as a region in collaboratively cooperating on energy matters, but at the same time recognizing, as the Prime Minister said, as the Honorable Prime Minister said, that within all that we have done so far, there is much that remains to be done. The Caribbean community is a project of integration. It's a project. Let's start with that understanding. And within that context, the integration project is one that functions around member states being supported by the Secretariat and institutions of the community in their pursuit of their sustainable development agenda, goals and targets. In fact, within the context of that support and work, the principle has always been one of functional cooperation among a multiplicity of actors, where it is that we seek to work according to our collective strengths so as to reduce the shortcomings of each other to deliver maximum benefits to all. The Prime Minister pointed out, ladies and gentlemen, in her remarks, and rightly so, that energy was not one of the pillars of the revised treaty of Chaguaramas, which is the basis of the integration movement. In fact, energy took its mandate from the 24th regular meeting, the 24th regular meeting of the heads of government, the Conference of Heads of Governments of CARICOM, which was in 2002. And this came about at a time when global oil prices were rising fast towards what was then an historic high, approaching over $30 a barrel. In 2002, $30 a barrel was high. And as a result of that fast approaching historical high price of oil, the heads deemed it fit to identify energy as one of the areas of cooperation and set up a task force to look at how we could have gone about the process of establishing a common energy policy for CARICOM. In 2008, when we really saw what what high oil prices were, when prices reached as high as $169 US per barrel in July 2008, the community saw it fit to begin to look at energy through different lenses. not just the lens at the time of the oil and gas corporation that was being touted based on that 2002 mandate, but rather to start looking at how it is that other countries that didn't have oil and gas resources could perhaps seek, firstly, to become more efficient in the way in which energy was produced, delivered, and used, because energy efficiency is the most common thread across the region, in fact. If there was ever to be an integration aspect of the energy sector, it would be energy efficiency. From oil-rich Trinidad to those with rich geothermal potential, and I should say oil-rich Trinidad and Guyana, to those who are net energy importers, energy efficiency is a common area which all can pursue because of the untapped opportunities for becoming more efficient. But to stick to that point about how did we get here, we determined in 2008, because of the economic pressures at the time due to the high prices of oil on the one hand, and because on the other hand there was a global movement towards, pushed by the COP15 in Copenhagen at the time, there was a global push towards cleaner energy development, cleaner energy technologies. In fact, it was in 2007, a year earlier, that the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change had published the fourth assessment report, what we refer to as AR4, that groundbreaking report that spoke to the fact that small island developing states, or SIDS as we call them, were the most vulnerable set of countries to climate change on the one hand, but more importantly, speaking to the fact that the impacts of climate were likely to be disproportionately borne by these countries. That report also spoke to the fact that climate change was unequivocally man-made. So born out of those factors, there was the climate push on the global front and the economic push that caused us to begin to look at all issues energy. And we broadened the scope at the time from just oil and gas corporation to looking at renewable energy development and energy efficiency. And in 2013, ministers of energy in CARICOM approved a regional energy policy as well as an energy roadmap and strategy to guide the implementation of the renewable energy and energy efficiency aspects of the policy. In 2008, when the principles and concepts of that expanded energy policy were being thought through, we were at around 6.2% renewable energy penetration. Most of that, around 90% of that was from, 95% of that was from hydro in Suriname, Belize, Jamaica, St. Vincent, and Dominica. Very little was from solar and wind. The only major wind project at the time was the Wigton wind project in Jamaica, which was at that time around 20 megawatts. And Gary was general manager here. He can tell you a lot more about that later. But in 2020, this is, 12 years later, the Prime Minister is writing that we haven't been moving with the kind of speed that we should have, although we have made some gains. We are at about 12.3, depending on how you count it, we could be as high as 13.1% renewable energy penetration within the region. Still, a significant amount of that, or the lion's share, comes from hydro in Belize and Suriname, the large hydro projects in Belize and Suriname. But there is also a significant amount that comes now from solar, PV, and wind. Jamaica's wind has gone close to 100 megawatts. We have seen quite a lot of solar here in Barbados even. Solar portfolios in excess, utility scale solar portfolios in excess in total of around 80 megawatts across the region when you look at them, at least those which are utility scale. We haven't started counting the rooftop ones yet. So in principle, we have accepted the challenge of energy, renewable energy and energy efficiency as a mechanism through which we can de-risk some of those issues associated with the volatilities of the oil sector and indeed to the gas sector, given that most of us are not oil or natural gas producers. I wanted to start there because that's where a lot of the pieces come from. Because it was on that basis that we established the CRAF. We started that conversation in 2014. In 2015, heads of governments agreed to the establishment of the CRAF and said that the establishment should be in Barbados. And that was at the 36th regular meeting of the Conference of Heads. And then by October of 2015, I remembered we were sitting in this very same building having the inauguration of the CRAF. That was long before Gary Jackson joined. But at the time we had the inauguration of the CRAF, celebrating at the time what we expected to be the transformation of the regional energy landscape through that dedicated implementation focus that the CRAF would have brought to bear. And it was during that period of October 2015 that a lot of the debates around where the CRAF should put its primary focus in its early stages. I recall the ministers who had attended that inauguration, ASG Cox and myself and a couple of us colleagues, including a number of the development partners, arguing vociferously for hours in the crane where we were at the time, until late in the night, until we eventually agreed that the issue that needed to be addressed fundamentally by the CRAF, amongst all others, but the one that must be addressed, even as it seeks to find other things to address, would have been that of the information deficit and the lack of a project preparation arrangement within the region. Typically, we would have had investors come, persons come, development partners come, and asking, where are projects? We want to fund projects. We are looking for projects. Even our own Caribbean Development Bank will ask for projects to be financed because there was a view that projects in the Caribbean were attractive, but the projects were just not there in the pipeline in a state within which they could have been financed. And so it was recognized that there needed to be a pumping modality to actually push projects through a pipeline so that when people come and ask for the pipeline, you're getting something that's coming out at the end of the pipe. You know, the pipeline must have water. If the pipeline is without water, then what's the point of the pipeline? So the project preparation facility came about as the means through which we would ensure that there was water in the pipe, so that when investors come to ask for pipelines of projects, it would not be dry. And so this is a challenge, gentlemen, and I've heard Dr. Jackson speak about it in his own intervention, and the colleagues who have made their presentation here have made it clear that the CRAF recognize the task and the challenge that is before it, and recognize that there is much that needs to be done to get the pipe running. Ladies and gentlemen, I therefore want to use the opportunity in these closing remarks to thank Dr. Jackson for his leadership of the center, to bring to reality a lot of those early visions that we had when we sat together for years trying to figure out what the CRAF should look like and how the CRAF should be operating. In fact, what we have seen emerging has in some instances gone well beyond what we had envisioned in those instances. And Doc, I want to thank you for bringing those visions and adding to those visions, even as we seek to benefit from what the CRAF will bring to the regional energy landscape. And of course, Dr. Jackson is not alone. He will be the first to remind us that he works with a very strong team of regional persons. And of course, there are those who have also come to support the region and have identified and integrated so seamlessly into the regional setup in the CRAF that sometimes I forget they are not from the region. So I want to thank the members of the CRAF team for working so diligently to have gotten us to the stage where we are with respect to the project preparation facility. And the expectation is that, as ASG Cox said in his remark, the quantity and quality of projects that are going to be emerging in the region will be such that never again will there be opportunities for financing being missed because of a lack of projects that are not available for investment. I want to also mention, within the context of the launch today, some historical facts around the CRAF, because sometimes it's important to understand where some of these thinkings came from. And the principle around credit risk abatement and credit risk is not one that is new, I will admit. In fact, there have been colleagues from other institutions who have said to me, Devon, international institutions, including IFIs, who have said, Devon, why is CARICOM going down this road of credit risk abatement? We know this thing doesn't work. Credit risk abatement does not work in Africa. Why are you doing it in the Caribbean? And we say to them, because in the Caribbean, we understand the issues that would have caused credit risk abatement not to work in other regions, and we are putting in the pieces that are necessary to ensure that it works for us. I remember it was in November 2016, we were supposed to have been having the 5th Caribbean Sustainable Energy Forum in Nassau, Bahamas. Hurricane Dorian struck, and we were intending to move the forum elsewhere, and the government of Bahamas said, Devon, please do not move the forum, give us a chance, let us recover, and then we'll host the forum at a later date. And we agreed that we shouldn't penalize the Bahamas for what would have been an extreme weather event that they had no control over. So we shifted the forum to January 2017. And it was that January 2017 forum where a good friend of mine, who a Chancellor Wright from the University of the West Indies, Wayne Vitalis, and I ran into each other for, after a long time. And we were talking about what was happening in the energy landscape and where it is that the CDF could play significant roles, and trying to understand where some of the emerging opportunities were. And of course, next thing you know, we were there conjuring all kind of ideas, and Wayne said, listen, Devon, give me some time to get back to Capital, to speak to my CEO and the colleagues at the CDF, and to figure this all out. And within 2 or 3 months, true to the form, Wayne had done his homework. His CEO was very excited, and the entire team at the CDF began to discuss with us the emergence of the credit risk abatement facility as one of the answers to the risk of project financing that the region was facing. And when we asked for support from the GIZ at the time through the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency Technical Assistance Project, which we call RETA, to help the CDF to figure out how this thing should be designed, the answer was an unwavering yes. And we agreed, as the TAPSEC was being developed, that this CRAF would have been one of the things that would receive significant focus because of the level of transformation that we think it could bring to the region. And again, there was, if you want to call it, a coalescence of minds that we would see this thing through. And therefore, I'm very happy that today we are standing here, not just speaking about the CRAF, but launching the CRAF with real projects and with real financial institutions on board, ready to start underwriting projects through the facility. I recall the conversation around the CRAF being driven by an experience of a biodigestion project, Gary, down in Jamaica. It was a biodigestion project that was being developed by a young lady, I won't call the name, in where Rosal was at the Ritz-Carlton, Rosal in Montego Bay. And she was taking the sewage from the hotel, running it through a biodigester to produce electricity, to self-generate part of the electricity required in the hotel. And when she sought to obtain commercial lending to support the project, included even from the Development Bank, there were significant requests for collateral, which she, as at the time, a 28-year-old who had just returned to the Caribbean from abroad after studying and coming back energized and wanting to do something, she wasn't able to provide. And they said to her, oh, you know, but your parents and your family are rich. Why wouldn't they underwrite this thing for you? And the truth is, none of us should have to go to our parents to underwrite a project that is feasible, whether or not they can afford it, because mechanisms should be in place to facilitate these things. And so I'm happy to see that where we are today, if there was the CRAF then, that project would have been financed today, because there would have been 80% of the collateral been underwritten through the CRAF in such an arrangement. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand today within a CARICOM where energy is no longer just an economic issue. It is an issue of community resilience. Energy is how it is that we will build cross-sectoral and multi-sectoral resilience to climate and other impacts. And as we do that, we have to ensure that our energy sector itself is resilient to multiple shocks, multiple hazards, resilient to shocks on the supply side, to shocks in the way in which we deliver. And also from the COVID experience, we recognize it should also be resilient to shocks on the demand side. Because we have seen where the energy demand would have fallen in some instances by 25–30% in some countries within a matter of days because of the emergency measures that were put in place through COVID. And these are things that are realities with which we have to contemplate and we have to work. And so in that regard, the Secretariat is pleased to continue working in the principle and spirit of functional cooperation with institutions of CARICOM in support of every single member state. And of course, thankfully, with the continued support of institutions such as the GIZ and governments such as the European Union and the government of Germany in respect to how we can build out the kind of sustainable development agenda that will improve the lives of every single business and citizen within CARICOM. I want to therefore close by thanking again the CRAF Executive Director and his team for the significant amount of work that has been done to date on the PPF, the CEO of the CDF, Rudinal Suma, and his team, especially Wayne and Laverne, and Eugene, and of course Lennox is not here, but if Lennox was here, you know, I frequently popped into the CDF. Oh, Lennox is here. Boy, everybody look different in the mask, Lennox, sorry. You know, but you know, these are institutions where I could turn up on any given day and have conversations about how it is that we can improve the state of affairs in the region, and you would never receive, you know, you'd never leave without knowing that there is commitment there from these persons who are working within these institutions. I want to thank too the colleagues from the GIZ and in general, and in particular the TAPSEC project, the TAPSEC. You know, when, Kyle, you remember when we were in the process of setting up the TAPSEC in the early stages, and at the time there were still questions around why the TAPSEC was required if it is that the TAPSEC would be doing a lot of what the RETA project at the time would be doing. And the understanding that we came to was that it takes many different efforts to get the same things done. A singularity of projects, a singularity of development partners, a singularity of focus is not going to move the needle near as much as is necessary for CARICOM to make the advances that we need to make. The energy situation is one that is difficult. The solutions that we require are complicated. We are talking about many things at the same time, achieving many things at the same time. We're talking about cost effectiveness. We're talking about clean, reliable, secure, resilient, you name it. Many, many different things, all within the constraints of small markets. and in a region that is separated by water, and in many instances with energy resources that are juxtaposed among some of our most pristine and clean spots. You're talking about trying to develop geothermal projects in areas that are natural reserves, national reserves, environmental reserves. And so it requires these multiplicity of efforts. The CRAF and the PPF is not the totality, ladies and gentlemen, of the picture. You would have seen some other things that would have emerged. Dr. Jackson spoke about the IRRP. And as I speak, you know, I spoke to the Prime Minister earlier and I lauded her call again for the fact that there needs to be a greater focus and integration on the integration of energy within the CSME and in general and the revised treaty in particular. And in that regard, I want to highlight the fact that this has not been something that has gone unnoticed for the months gone by. In September this year, energy ministers, during their meeting virtually this time because of the COVID situation, when the energy ministers met in the 82nd special meeting of the quoted energy, one of the things that was agreed to is that we need to develop a regional energy security strategy that looks at all the different pieces that are necessary for the Caribbean community to be secure in the way in which energy is produced and delivered and used. And that should look at everything from oil and gas resources to renewable energy options to energy efficiency, energy services, capacity building, and the movement of skilled labor in the energy sector. And we commit as a secretariat to working with our institutions and member states to ensure that we end up with a robust, energy secure Caribbean community within which the strategy can be anchored. And at this time, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to give my final thanks to those who have been working with Simon and the teams and the team of the TAPSEC, especially Robert. Robert, oftentimes I go after you because I'm impatient with the rate at which things are. I mean, I'm like the Prime Minister, I want things to happen fast. And so oftentimes I go after people because they are, you know, I don't think it's fast enough. But I must give credit to the TAPSEC team for having brought us here, because much of what we have been able to achieve as institutions at this point, much of what we have been able to do in the CRAF and the CDF, and much of what we have been able to do with the PPF and the CRAF and the IRRP and a lot of the other things was because of the support that we got from the TAPSEC and the GIZ. So I would like to thank you. Other institutions and entities have supported us, and I will not leave them out. The European Union is here. The TAPSEC would not have been possible without the European Union. And Kyle, on behalf of the Secretariat and the CARICOM institutions, I would like to express thanks to the EU, and you can take that back to your headquarters where I know your ambassador and your team leaders are meeting to think about the next wave of funding for energy even as we speak. And not just energy, but other matters. I'm just talking about energy in this particular case. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end by thanking you all for being here. Those of you who are physically here, and those of you who are here, not in person, but online. And I do look forward to working with you continually to make the energy future of the Caribbean community more secure. Have a blessed day and rest of week. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the conclusion of this morning's activities. All that is left for me to say is thank you very much for your patience, your time, and it's now really up to you, the community here, to access these two excellent fit-for-purpose facilities. You have the contact information, so let us do partnership in moving this region to a new platform. Let us have confidence in ourselves and our abilities as we go forward together. For those of you who are online, unfortunately, we cannot invite you to the few refreshments we have for those who are physically present in the foyer. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day and stay safe. Thank you.
From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was